Welcome back to World's Best Gardens, and this week we're looking at Stowe Gardens, which were created by Richard Temple, and he was very influential in the 1700s, being a politician and also a military person. And so these are in England and in Buckingham, and we had three designers that were very crucial to the development: Charles Bridgeman, William Kent, and lastly, Capability Brown, that's Lancelot Brown. The first two were the ones that sort of did most of the development and the planning stages, and it sort of started off as a fairly formal geometric design and then generally kind of went from that to a very natural landscape. So this is one of the viewpoints as you come into the gardens. It's called the Corinthian Arch, and you can sort of see that right through there it goes down a symmetrical line. And we were lucky enough to, because it's such a huge garden, we were lucky enough to get this little golf cart trip to get down by the water feature, this big lake. So initially this was a geometric octagonal sort of lake, and then it's been made into more of a serpentine snake shape and more informal as the gardens were developed. So it was interesting to walk around. It was a very natural park-like gardens, and you had these things like these plains, which were around about 15 meters apart, and it was a reasonably hot, sunny day, and so it was quite pleasant to walk around. Like I said, it's a very large garden, and you do need kind of almost a whole day to see all that it has there. But these gardens were instrumental and very pivotal in the change in the landscape way people did landscape design. So they went from formal gardens into like the Versailles and French formal gardens, very symmetrical, to a more natural laid out landscape like what we see here. And along the way, as interesting focal points along the way to make the walk interesting, they would place these various quite large structures, and usually they had some relevance to Greek or Roman times and buildings, things like the Acropolis or various things like the Pantheon, which we also saw in Stowe Head as well, roughly kind of all happening at the sort of same time. This was the fashion. And these gardens were for the very aristocratic group, the ones that were the influences in the politics, and this is where you would show off your garden and you'd sort of walk around it. So lots of money poured into these gardens to impress and to entertain the people that were there, that were walking around, people like politicians, the influences of the time. This was just a little Chinese house, probably one of the earlier Chinese buildings that had been placed there. So this large stretch of water was all improvised and wasn't there initially, so it's all been placed in, but looks very natural, like it had been there for thousands of years. So lots of gravel paths and reasonably nice to walk around the gardens. And you've got these large structures like this gothic building up there, which we never actually went to because it's probably a good kilometre to get up there, and we just simply didn't have time to do it. So we kept on our walk and admiring the scenery, and there's quite a lot of bird and insect life that's happening as you're walking throughout the garden. A lot of people taking picnics, and this was kind of a cool part as we just you're walking through the gardens. And we're coming up to this sort of just a bridge, and it hasn't got any particular name, this bridge. It's just called the bridge, which I think was a bit of a shame because it was actually quite a nice feature to the garden. And we just sort of walked across this bridge. Again, just a water feature. These gardens are not based on lots of flowers and lots of shrubs, but more kind of permanent clumpings of large trees and informal meandering paths and informal irregular shaped water features. And as you can see, the main building up there, which we never got to because it's just a little bit too far. I believe that's used as a bit of a school now for kids, and the National Trust do run this, and they've sort of had this garden for a few years now. The water itself was quite shallow, around about 40-50 centimetres, and as you can sort of see, in the distance, so you've got the two buildings, and then that original Corinthian arch, which is way in the distance. But then that is the symmetry. So that's really all that remains of the formality, is actually the layout of these two buildings and the Corinthian arch, and that dissects all the way across to the other side. And everything else is sort of laid out in a very irregular, natural pattern. So it's quite interesting that you've got that little bit of a combination of formality that still remains, and then everything else is based in a very natural layout and informality. So some of the initial breakaway from the formal gardens was that the fact that there was a sort of England wanted to distinguish themselves from French gardens, and this was one really nice way to do it, is to just go completely opposite. And so they did take some inspiration, I believe, from some Asian gardens, some Chinese gardens, which at the time were doing more of this informal, natural layout. But then they've evolved it into more of a natural English landscape style. And now we're just sort of having a bit of a sit down and reflecting on our holiday. And so it was kind of a bit of a time for reflection.
We're here on our last day in England. We fly tomorrow to Japan. It's been a beautiful, beautiful holiday. Had a great time. Where did we go first? We went to London, then we went to Somerset, then we went to Richmond, and we've just come down from the lakes today.
Yeah.
It's been magic.
And this is Stowe on our little trip on our way to Heathrow. It's a big park-like gardens, and really enjoying it so far. And what do you think of it there? What's your... This poor boy, look at his sweat on him. It's hot today.
It's a hot day.
Can you say something?
Garden cool.
That Theo wants to make his own garden. And he's going to charge people $20 and it's going to be cool. That's his thumbs up. Okay, so one of the design techniques that people like Kent and Lancelot Brown used to use is a thing called a ha-ha, which is a sunken ditch. So here you could have your farm animals on one side, and then on this side, to stop them coming and getting onto the places that you want, you'd have a sunken wall. And this wall is probably like about at least 2 meters, and that's the sort of ditch there. And it's a great way of not having any fences that are going to obstruct and block your view. And the view, of course, is from that archway there, when we came in, to all the way around to the main building over there, all unobstructed. Okay guys, that wraps up this video on Stowe Gardens. Well worth a visit if you're in that part of England.